Chapter 488. Gu Xingyin did not expect that in such a short period of time, something would happen. The system did notice this. However, compared to everything in this world, it was an illusory body and could not do anything. By the time it notified Gu Xingyin, the black gas had already entered Cecily's body. This black gas must be the source of Cecily's protagonist aura, Gu Xingyin guessed. That night, she cast a concealment spell on herself and came to Cecily's room. Her small body sank into the bedding, and she seemed to be sleeping very soundly. She looked just like a normal human little girl. Just as Gu Xingyin was about to step forward and carefully examine her body, Cecily, who was sleeping on the bed, suddenly opened her eyes. That look. That was definitely not something a 6-year-old child should have. Gu Xingyin immediately made that judgment. She watched as Cecily got off the bed and walked towards a room at the side. She simply followed behind her, intending to see what this Cecily wanted to do. Beside Cecily's room was the room of the maid who was in charge of taking care of her. Gu Xingyin watched as she Lily pushed open the door and walked straight to the maid's bed, as if no one was around. She reached her hand into the maid's bedding and pulled out the maid's hand from under the bedding. She pressed the maid's hand against her own small palm. Seeing this, Gu Xingyin seemed to have understood something. She silently chanted an incantation and extended her index finger to each of her eyes. Sure enough, this time she could clearly see that there was an inconspicuous qi flowing from the maid's body through their palms and into Cecily's body. Lily's immature face revealed a very satisfied expression. For such an expression to appear on a little girl of her age, it must be said that it was very strange. Gu Xingyin thought for a moment. She reached out her hand and quietly pointed outside. Clang! The sound of something falling to the ground could be heard. Then an impatient voice could be heard. Who is it? It's the middle of the night. Then someone seemed to get up. Lily seemed to be shocked. She looked at the maid reluctantly and retracted her hand, allowing the maid's hand to land heavily on the bed. Throughout the entire process, the maid showed no signs of waking up. Gu Xingyin watched as Lily quickly left the maid's room and returned to her own room. She walked up to the maid and used magic to check her body. There was nothing wrong with the maid's body. It seemed that Cecily's actions had no effect on her body. She took one last look at the maid sleeping soundly on the bed and left. Returning to the courtyard where she lived, Gu Xingyin was surprised to find Alinar standing at her door. 6 years had passed. This man's eyes had not changed at all. However, his eyes were getting deeper and deeper. He was no longer the naive elf, who could be seen through at a glance. Gu Xingyin was comforted by this. Whether Alinar was her lover or not, after being the elf queen for so many years, Gu Xingyin hoped that these pure and beautiful elves would be more careful. Otherwise, when something really happened, they would be at a disadvantage. Your Majesty? Alinar did not ask anything. He just stared at her, making Gu Xingyin feel a lot of pressure. Chapter 489. Gu Xingyin thought for a while and told Alan about Lily in a very vague way. Of course, she could not say anything about the plot in Elenmere. She just said that she was lucky enough to see the future under the holy tree. This human girl called Cecily would bring a great disaster to the elven race, so she came to have a look. Elenmere was speechless for a long time. His first reaction was to heave a sigh of relief. Her Majesty was not interested in that human. Immediately, he realized how selfish his thoughts were. At this moment, he was only thinking about his own affairs. Compared to the disaster of the entire elven race, the latter was obviously much more important. He hurriedly asked, "Have you found the reason?" Gu Xingyin shook her head and said, "I have a clue, but I haven't found the real reason." It was already very late, and Gu Xingyin did not say much to Elenmere. The two of them went to rest. The next day, there was a rumor that a maid in Cecily's house was almost hit by a carriage when she went out. Fortunately, the coachman reined in the horse, and she was only slightly scratched. However, it was not over yet. When the maid went to buy something, a scabbard flew out of a weapon shop and hit her head. When she went to the clinic for treatment, she stepped on something on the ground and broke her leg. Everyone in the small town wondered if the maid had done something wrong and angered the gods. Otherwise, how could there be so many coincidences? The maid was also very scared. Even when she was carried to the clinic, she kept putting her hands together and praying to the gods. When Gu Xingyin heard the news, she frowned. Sure enough, from this time, Cecily had begun to rob others of their luck. No, was this She Lily the real She Lily? Or was it two different names? To really figure out this matter, she had to find the source directly. Gu Xingyin acted like a strong person that night. She forced the sleeping Cecily to a deserted place. She put Cecily on the ground. I know you're awake, no need to pretend. Gu Xingyin said lightly. She Lily's eyes trembled. She opened her eyes and glanced at Gu Xingyin. Then she looked around and burst into tears. Who are you? Where is this place? I want to find my mother. Gu Xingyin gave her acting skills a thumbs up in his heart. If she had not seen with her own eyes how she robbed others of their luck in the middle of the night, she would have been fooled. Don't cry, I know you're not Cecily. Who are you? When he said this, Gu Xingyin used his magic power. His voice seemed to directly question one's soul, causing one's expression to turn cold. She Lily put away her expression and looked at Gu Xingyin seriously for the first time. However, she used camouflage magic. In this world, not many people could see through the camouflage magic of the Elven Queen. Cecily knew in her heart that this person was more powerful than she thought, so she stopped pretending. Why would a person like you come to a place like Locktown? And why would you target a poor person like me? Poor person? Gu Xingyin sneered. No, you're not a poor person. You're just good at turning ordinary people into poor people. She exposed what the person in front of her was doing. Chapter 490. She Lily's expression changed. She looked at Gu Xingyin cautiously. I just want to live. I'm not in your way. Why do you have to force me? Gu Xingyin did not listen to her quibbling. How could the words of a person who relied on hurting others to strengthen herself be credible? She raised her hand, and a light green barrier enveloped the two of them. She remembered that in the training materials that the system gave her, there were many examples of people who died from talking too much. So this time, she was too lazy to talk nonsense with this She Lily. She raised her hand, and an extremely beautiful silver longbow appeared in her left hand. She placed her right hand on the bowstring. A light green arrow slowly formed at the tip of her finger. Elf! She Lily's expression turned ugly. She clearly recognized which race this skill came from. Gu Xingyin loosened his grip, and the arrow with powerful destructive power whizzed toward She Lily. She Lily felt the power contained in it, and her expression turned ugly. However, she could not use it at all in the enchantment, so she could only flee in a sorry state. Everyone says that the elf race is the kindest race that does not kill. Why won't you let an innocent person like me go? She continued to argue. Gu Xingyin ignored her, and shot another arrow through the air. Wait! You don't want to care about this little girl's life? If this arrow hits me, I can guarantee that I won't necessarily die, but this little girl will definitely be finished. She Lily saw that the other party didn't care about her at all, so she finally shouted out her trump card. As expected, Gu Xingyin's hand stopped moving. There's a chance. She Lily's eyes lit up. She finally had the time to catch her breath and continued. I don't know what your relationship with this little girl is, but I'm sure you don't want to see her die like this. I can promise that as long as you promise to let me go, I will make sure that she is unharmed, and will leave far away, never to disturb her life again. Gu Xingyin seemed to think for a moment. She Lily also looked at her nervously. Okay, Gu Xingyin decided. She looked at Cecily and said, I can agree to your request, but you must swear that you will never harm Cecily, and you will never approach this town again. She Lily's eyes lit up, and she quickly nodded. No problem. It seemed that this little girl was very important to this elf. If he could make use of her. Various thoughts flashed through She Lily's mind. All of a sudden, Gu Xingyin spoke up. Make a magic oath now. Use the words you just said. Cecily was not surprised. She nodded and stretched out 3 fingers on her right hand. In the name of the gods. Just as she started to speak, a sudden change occurred. A meteor-like arrow pierced through her chest at an unstoppable speed. Ah! 2 screams suddenly came from the small body. Gu Xingyin could clearly hear that one of the voices was Cecily, and the other was a mature woman's voice. It should be the person she had just dealt with. Gu Xingyin saw a trace of black smoke drifting out of Cecily's body. It danced in the air for a while before disappearing into thin air. She was relieved. It was finally over. Previously, she pretended to agree to this person's request to numb her, so that she could give her a fatal blow when she was most relaxed. She slowly walked towards Cecily, who was lying on the ground, took out a bottle of the spring of life from her sleeve, and gently poured it on the wound in front of her chest. As if a miracle had happened, the wound began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just a short moment, it was as good as new. Gu Xingyin picked up Cecily's small figure and left. However, she did not notice that after she left, a thin black fog suddenly appeared in the originally empty place. The fog condensed into the shape of a human face in the air. It looked at the direction Gu Xingyin left with resentment, and then walked away. Chapter 491. Gu Xingyin sent little Shi Lily back to her home, and no one noticed anything unusual. Looking at the innocent Shi Lily, who was sleeping soundly, Gu Xingyin breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, this matter was resolved. She returned to the courtyard in the town, and Alan was anxiously waiting for her. "You're back?" Seeing Gu Xingyin, he stood up happily. Originally, he wanted to go with her, but Her Majesty the Queen sternly stopped him from going. Gu Xingyin nodded and smiled. "We can go back to the Starlight Forest." Hearing this, Alan showed a happy smile. After staying in the human world for 6 years, he was used to seeing all kinds of good and evil, and he missed the pure beauty of the Starlight Forest. 6 years was not a long time for the elves, but it was not short either. The return of the two was undoubtedly welcomed by the elves. "Your Majesty the Queen, a new elf is coming to this world." A female elf happily shared the good news with Gu Xingyin. This was indeed good news. The elves usually relied on the elven mother tree to breed new members. In the past, it was good to have 1 or 2 little elves born every 1,000 years. However, since the birth of Elenmere 1,000 years ago, the elves had already given birth to several little elves. For the elves who regarded the elves as treasures, this was simply a joyous event. Alan's popularity in the elves also increased. It was said that Alan's birth brought good luck to the elves. Gu Xingyin also showed a happy smile when she heard the news. After living in the elves for so many years, she really had a good impression of this pure and kind race. Naturally, she was also very happy about this kind of thing. On the day of the birth of the elves, all the elves changed into festive clothes and stood in front of the elven mother tree, waiting for the arrival of a new life. Everyone's face was full of anticipation, except for Alan. Alan felt that he might be sick. It was a joyous event like the birth of the elves, and everyone was very happy, but he did not feel the slightest bit of joy. In fact, when he stood beside the queen and saw that she was just like all the other clansmen, her light green eyes were filled with joy, and she held great expectations for the new life that was about to be born. He actually had a dark thought in his heart. He was not happy. He was not happy that the queen's attention was completely attracted by other things. Once again, Alinar was vexed about why he had to reach adulthood so early. If he was still in his infantile state, Her Majesty the Queen would have paid more attention to him. While he was letting his imagination run wild, the surrounding clansmen suddenly let out low cries of joy. The little fairy was born. Just like Alan's when he was first born. The elves' appearance and their strength. The stronger they were, the closer they were closer to adulthood. The appearance and the appearance of the elves' appearance was the appearance of the elves when they were born. Her soft green hair hung loosely on her shoulders. Her long eyelashes flickered, and her big eyes were filled with curiosity towards this world. She looked at her clansmen without any fear of strangers, and giggled from her mouth. "What a beautiful little fellow." After the little child looked around at everyone, she walked to Gu Xingyin's side and hugged her leg. Alan's face suddenly darkened. Chapter 492. Gu Xingyin also looked at the newborn elf in astonishment. What was the meaning of this? However, the little girl refused to let go after hugging Gu Xingyin. She even leaned her little face against Gu Xingyin's skirt. Her big, adorable eyes were shining brightly as she said, "I like you." The surrounding elves were also surprised. They did not expect that other than Alan, there would be a second elf who was not afraid of the queen's aura. Some of the elves showed a look of disappointment. It seemed that the idea of becoming the elf's guardian was hopeless. Gu Xingyin looked down at the little elf who refused to let go of him, and was a little hesitant. This little fellow was very beautiful and adorable, but he didn't treat her as soft-hearted as he did with Alan Eyre. He couldn't bear to see the slightest bit of disappointment on his face. Thinking about it this way, although she did not recognize Alan at the beginning, the familiarity that came from the soul could not be deceived. However, it was really hard for him to harden his heart when such a young and adorable little fellow looked at him with such a dependent gaze. However, she did not have to think about it for long. The little elf on her lap was suddenly held by a pair of hands. It was Alan. Alan smiled at the little elf who was focused on his face. It was like a spring flower blooming, and the little elf's eyes were full of stars. "I like you very much, Ailey." He gently called out the little elf's name. "Are you willing to let me be your guardian?" The little elf was fascinated by his smile. When she heard his question, she had already forgotten that she liked the queen the most at the beginning. She hurriedly nodded, and her words were not particularly clear. "I like Ailey, like. This meant that she was willing. Alan smiled, hugged little Ailey, and bowed to Gu Xingyin. "I am very sorry, Your Majesty. I really like little Ailey. Can I be her guardian, teach her, and love her until she becomes an adult?" Although Gu Xingyin didn't know why Alan would suddenly be interested in this little elf, she was relieved to see that someone had accepted Ailey. She smiled and said, "As long as both of you are willing, the goddess of nature will bless you." And so the matter was settled. Many elves looked at Alan with envy. Alan had just reached adulthood. He would be able to raise a little fairy. When would there be a cute little baby that liked him? Ali was arranged to live in Elanmir's tree house. Since Elanmir came of age, he had moved out of the queen's palace. Gu Xingyin originally thought that Alan would not be so clingy to her in the future, but she did not expect that Alan would come to her palace that night. Seeing that something seemed to have happened to Alan, Gu Xingyin dismissed the maid beside her and asked with concern, "Alan, what happened to you?" Alan had been thinking that he was very strange these days. He thought that he might be sick or under some kind of black magic. Otherwise, why would he have feelings of jealousy and disgust towards the elves of the same race, and even the little elf that had just been born? He thought about it for a long time, and finally decided to confess to his most beloved and respected queen. "Your Majesty, I seem to be sick." Chapter 493. Gu Xingyin was worried. "Allenby, what's wrong?" Allenby began to speak slowly. "I don't know when it started, but my attention has always been on you, Your Majesty. I found more and more that when I see Your Majesty smiling at others, I feel unhappy. When I see Your Majesty's gentle expression towards others, I feel jealous. I hope Your Majesty's eyes can always stay on me." Allenby's expression was very distressed. He looked at Gu Xingyin with melancholy. "Your Majesty, is Allenby cursed?" When Gu Xingyin heard him speak, she understood what was going on. Her lover, even if he did not understand love at all, even if he was not aware of his own feelings, but the possessiveness that came from the depths of his soul still existed. Gu Xingyin was very happy. Since Allenby now had such thoughts, then he was not far from leaving the aperture. She had to guide him slowly. Gu Xingyin frowned slightly, looking a little distressed. Allenby looked at her, but his heart was in pain. He regretted coming to the queen. It seemed that he had brought trouble to her. Gu Xingyin was actually just thinking about the appropriate words. She thought for a moment and pointed to a vase next to her. "Allenby, if you came tomorrow and found that this vase was taken away by other elves, would you be sad?" Allenby thought for a moment and shook his head. Gu Xingyin continued, "Then if the starlight flower that I gave you was taken away by others, would you be unhappy?" Allenby nodded honestly. Gu Xingyin asked again, "Then, do you know that when something is taken away by others, you have two feelings?" Allenby actually had an answer in his heart. "Because I care about the latter." "Why do you care?" Allenby answered without hesitation this time. "Because the starlight flower was given to Allenby by Her Majesty, and Allenby likes Her Majesty." Gu Xingyin smiled. "So you see, Alan, you have those feelings because you care about me too much. I'm very happy that Alan likes me." Allenby did not expect that after saying such selfish words, Her Majesty the Queen did not blame him, but instead comforted and enlightened him. His mood suddenly brightened, but he was still puzzled. But Your Majesty, selfishness and jealousy are all wrong. They shouldn't exist. Yes. Alan Eyre, I'm very happy that you came to me after discovering the problem. Gu Xingyin looked at him gently. You've just become an adult, and your temperament isn't mature enough. All of this is just because you're too dependent on me, the guardian. You have not hurt anyone because of these emotions, Alan. There is no need to be unhappy about it. Does Her Majesty mean that my current state is normal? Alan always felt that something was wrong. But the Queen would never be wrong. Alan said to himself. Gu Xingyin guided him patiently. If you're still confused, why don't you read more books? There are countless wisdom and the experience of your predecessors. In that, maybe you can find the answer you want. After sending away the problematic lover Allenby, Gu Xingyin used her mind to sweep through the largest and oldest library in the elven race. Yes, all the love guides from the human world were moved out and placed in the outermost place that could be seen at a glance. Chapter 494. Allenby went to the library obediently. In fact, he didn't know what book he should look for. Perhaps it should be a book like How to Control Your Emotions. But when he came to the library, the first thing he saw were rows of bookshelves, all of which were Secret Love, How to Pursue the Object of Love, and Love Book. Allenby felt as if he was hallucinating. Were there such books in the library? After so many years in the human world, he had a certain understanding of the feelings between men and women, but he had only seen a little and never paid attention to it seriously. The elves were a race with very little emotional needs. Perhaps it should be said that they were very loving everything in nature and all the beautiful things. On the contrary, they didn't care so much about the feelings between men and women. It was not that there were no couples among the elves, but they were relatively rare. Usually, Allenby had no interest in these books, but today, he suddenly secretly took a few books. The elves never needed to register when they took books, because there was never such a thing as not returning a book after borrowing it. 2 days later, Allenby really listened to the advice of Her Majesty the Queen and read the book seriously. This reading opened the door to a new world for him. Love. Was it actually like this? The book said that one's eyes would unconsciously follow a person, hoping that her attention would be focused on oneself. Seeing that she cared about others, one would feel jealous and selfishly want to monopolize her. These phenomena were clearly the performance of liking a person. It was not the kind of love that was respected and trusted, but the love between a man and a woman. Allenby suddenly panicked. Had he always had such thoughts about the Queen? He carefully compared his own situation with the book, and found that he was completely in line with the book. This made him even more confused. Who was Her Majesty the Queen? In the eyes of all the elves, she was the spokesperson of the goddess of nature in the magic fantasy continent. She was the most noble and inviolable existence in the hearts of all the elves. How could he have such thoughts about the Queen? Gu Xingyin hadn't seen Allenby for several days. She had been secretly paying attention to him, and naturally knew what he had been doing recently. This child, he should be very confused recently, right? Gu Xingyin had no intention of helping him at all. Instead, she was interested to see what he would do. Elder Alan hadn't come to the palace for a long time. When even the maids in the palace felt that something was wrong, Alan finally appeared in front of Gu Xingyin. Alan, you haven't been here for a long time. Did something happen? Gu Xingyin looked at Alan carefully. Very good. His expression was calm, and his eyes were gentle. She could not see any emotions. Alan's heart trembled when he heard the Queen's voice. For the past few days, ever since he had recognized his own feelings, he had been constantly trying to mentally prepare himself. He planned to hide this rebellious thought deep in his heart, and not let anyone see it. Her Majesty the Queen treated all elves equally, with the same tolerance and care. If she discovered his feelings, Alan did not dare to think of the consequences. Chapter 495. However, no matter how many hints he made in his heart, the moment he saw the Queen, the moment he heard her ask him, "What's wrong?" Aliner found that the defense in his heart that he had built for several days almost collapsed. Aliner's eyelashes fluttered, and he lowered his head. He was afraid that facing the queen now, she would easily see through his thoughts that he could not hide at all. How could Gu Xingyin not see his discomfort? It was rare to see such a lover. In the previous world, this man was always very domineering. She could not help but want to see more of such an obedient Alienor. She walked down from the throne and came to the side of the male elf with his head down. The two were very close, and Alienor could clearly smell the fragrance of the queen's hair. Alienor, you look very wrong. Tell me what happened. The queen stood in front of him, and her soft voice sounded in his ears. Alienor knew that at this time, her gentle and beautiful green eyes were looking at him. He took a deep breath, raised his head, and bumped into the soft spring water that could make people drown. I'm fine, Your Majesty. Alienor tried to make himself look no different than usual. But the next moment, a pair of soft hands touched his wrist. Alienor knew that the queen did not mean anything else, but he could not help but feel his heart skip a beat. Gu Xingyin just tilted her head and carefully checked his body. Well, it seems that my Alienor is indeed fine. Gu Xingyin took back her hand. It turned out that she just thought that he was not feeling well. The warm touch on his hand disappeared, and Alienor suppressed the faint reluctance in his heart. But he saw the queen suddenly raise a mischievous smile that was very different from usual. She even winked a little playfully. I know Alienor must have something on his mind. There must be a little secret that he does not want to tell me. Her rare naughtiness made Alan's eyes widen. It turned out that Her Majesty the Queen also had such a childish appearance. She wasn't always so high and mighty as to treat everyone equally. Then, could he also hope that this queen one day in the future would also accept a feeling from him? Alienor's heart was burning, but in the next moment, he heard the queen's words. My Alienor, as an unqualified guide, I was not able to accompany you in the most important 1,000 years. In the future, I hope that if you have anything you can tell me. Gu Xingyin's tone, as if she was talking to a junior who had not grown up. She still treats me as an elf who has not grown up. Alienor thought gloomily. Your Majesty, Alan is already an adult, he said to Gu Xingyin with a straight face. Gu Xingyin's eyes were full of smiles, as if he was looking at an unreasonable child. Yes, I know. Alienor is already an adult. It was a perfunctory tone of coaxing. Alienor didn't know why, but an impulse came up in his heart. He suddenly took a step forward and hugged the queen, who he had always regarded as a god in his heart. The woman in front of him clearly did not expect this to happen. She looked at him with a little surprise. Alienor used all of his courage on this hug, and suddenly he did not know what to do. Chapter 496. Alan looked at the elven queen in his arms. She usually looked so high and unapproachable, but when she was in his arms, she was just a slender and soft person who only reached his shoulders. Alan's face was a little red, and he stuttered, Your Majesty, Alan has grown up, and I am an adult male elf. He reached out his hand and compared the height difference between the two, clearly expressing his meaning. Gu Xingyin laughed out loud. Alan looked at her smiling face in his arms. Unlike the gentle and light smile of the queen in the past, the queen in front of him smiled brightly. At a glance, he could see that it was the kind of happy smile that came from the bottom of her heart. Alan suddenly felt that whether she thought he was childish or not, as long as he could make her smile like this, it was enough. His mood suddenly became less nervous. He let go of his arms, took a step back, and bowed to Gu Xingyin. I am really sorry, please forgive my rudeness. Gu Xingyin did not blame him. There was a slight change in the relationship between the two. Alan still respected the queen as before, but he no longer regarded her as a high and untouchable existence. He hid his feelings in the bottom of his heart and looked at her silently. In the eyes of other elves, the relationship between the two seemed to be more intimate than before. Alienor had another worry. The little elf named Ally. At first, he saw that she seemed to like the queen very much. In a moment of impulse, Alan did not hesitate to use his beauty and took the initiative to ask to be Ally's guardian. Now it seemed that he had taken on a big trouble. Alan dared to swear to the goddess of nature that he had never seen such a naughty little elf. He was so obedient when he was young, and other elves were also soft and cute. Why did he meet such a little weirdo here? Elder Alan, did little Ally disappear again? The elves on the road saw Alan and showed an I know expression. Ally was now famous. She and Elder Alan would put on a You Find Me, I Hide show every day. There was even one time. It was said that Elder Alan actually found Ally in the nest of a forest python, goddess of nature. The elves who heard the news all had great sympathy for Elder Elenmere. At the same time, he was secretly glad that little Ailey had taken a fancy to Elder Alan's beauty and didn't choose him. If it were them, they wouldn't be able to handle such a lively little elf. Alan was busy with little Allie, but Gu Xingyin was very relaxed. Ever since she returned from Lock Town, she had been paying attention to Cecily on and off. Now that Lily was 16 years old, she didn't have any heaven-defying good luck like in the original plot. She also didn't often encounter any unlucky things in that small town, so she was relieved. From the looks of it, Lily's side was really fine. Gu Xingyin, who was relieved of the burden in her heart, watched Alan being tormented by little Ailey every day, but she couldn't bear to teach him a lesson. It was really a good show, until the system suddenly told her a message. What did you say? She stood up from the throne in shock. Chapter 497. The system had just told her that there was another person with heaven-defying luck in the human world. Cecily was still in Lock Town, so who was that person? System, are you sure that the new person is the same as Cecily in the original plot? She also relies on stealing other people's luck to strengthen herself? Gu Xingyin asked. The system was very sure. That's right. Also, I have to tell you something. The person who took over Cecily's body back then did not die. This time, she is still the one causing trouble. Gu Xingyin was really shocked this time. She clearly shot an arrow through Cecily's body and saw the black shadow disappear. The system was also there at that time. In other words, that thing did not only hide from her, but also from the system. System, do you know what that thing is? The system searched for a while. I can confirm that it is not a creature of this world. There is no such race in this world, the Fantasia continent. The system secretly despised the laws of this world. The host could hide from the laws of this world, because she had a cheat in her hand. Someone helped her to hide from the laws of heaven. That black shadow was an outsider. But the laws of this world did not notice it. Really, the system did not know how to describe it. Gu Xingyin frowned. If I don't know what race it is, how do I know how to destroy it? The system, wait a moment. Gu Xingyin looked at the white light that flashed on its body. A palm-sized, very simple-looking small brocade pouch appeared in Gu Xingyin's hand. This is an artifact that is specially used to seal unknown outsiders. Gu Xingyin looked at the inconspicuous little brocade pouch in her hand and asked curiously, there's actually a special item. System, is there a host who specializes in solving illegal outsiders? The system was surprised by her sharp senses and nodded. Yes, we have many different types of tasks. There are also a variety of selected hosts to complete the tasks. Gu Xingyin was very curious about this. Are they all created like me? The system explained. The host situation is rather unique. Most of the hosts are selected from various planes. Humans who meet the requirements are usually people with very strong wills. Seeing that Gu Xingyin still wanted to ask more questions, the system, which had already revealed a lot, hurriedly said, Host, please deal with this outsider as soon as possible. Although there was no explicit rule stating that these things could not be disclosed to the host, the default rule was to refuse to disclose them to the host. It was already breaking the rules. If the host asked more questions later, such as the topic of mission completion rate, it was afraid that the host's imagination would run wild after it gave the answer. Only her own host was not restricted by the completion of the mission. In other words, whether the mission was successful or not, it had no effect on her. The system had never received any instructions regarding punishment. Compared to other hosts who would be killed if they couldn't reach a certain mission requirement, his own host was definitely the most pampered and loved one. However, her identity was also unique. The host thought to himself, in this world, there was no such thing as fairness. Gu Xingyin had been with the system for so many worlds, so she understood it quite well. She knew that it was obviously trying to change the topic. Perhaps there were some things that were not suitable for her to know. However, one day, I will know everything that I want to know, she thought silently. Chapter 498. Gu Xingyin informed the elders of his clan that he was going to make a trip to the human world. Alinar wanted to go with her, but was rejected by Gu Xingyin. After all, she was going to deal with an unknown enemy, and she didn't want Alinar to take the risk with her. Alinar looked a little down, but didn't say anything. Gu Xingyin felt that time was tight, so she left after a brief explanation. It wasn't that she was impatient, but the Cecily that would bring disaster to the elves was no longer a threat. But according to the system, it didn't matter whether it was Cecily or not. The key was that the shell of the thing that was still alive in this world hadn't changed. If it was allowed to continue developing, it was likely that it would bring trouble to the elf clan. Since the system had already noticed the existence of the outsider, Gu Xingyin went straight to where it was. What surprised Gu Xingyin was that the thing chose a person who was much more powerful than Cecily this time. It was the princess of the human empire. Princess Andis was a very talented genius in magic, so it didn't cause much of an impact after it took over her body. At most, everyone thought that the princess's talent was getting better as she grew older. Since Gu Xingyin had something provided by the system, he naturally didn't have to worry about anything. On the first night of his arrival in the imperial capital, he cast a sleeping spell and went directly to the princess's bedroom. "Who are you?" Andis, who was about to lie down and sleep, looked at Gu Xingyin warily. In fact, when Andis said this, she already knew the identity of the person in front of her. Gu Xingyin didn't disguise herself this time. Such an obvious elf appearance, such a beautiful and flawless face, and such a powerful aura. Who else could it be other than the Elven Queen? Andis wanted to sound the alarm, but it was useless. Gu Xingyin had cast a barrier around this place. "It's useless," Gu Xingyin said softly. "In this world, there were only 2 people who had the ability to break my enchantment. Now there is only 1 person left." Andy's expression changed. She understood the meaning behind Gu Xingyin's words. She was referring to the human emperor and the golden dragon king. Since the fall of the human emperor 1,000 years ago, there was only 1 person left in this world who could go against the Elven Queen. "Oh, I almost forgot about you. Perhaps if you don't die today, you will be able to do it a long, long time later." Gu Xingyin was right. In the original plot, She Lily became the #1 expert in the fantasy continent. Andis's expression changed. She forced a smile and said, "I don't deserve such praise from your majesty. I want to know how I, Andis, offended your majesty to make you say something like this." Andis had clearly stated that she was here to take her life. Gu Xingyin didn't take out her bow to hide her identity this time. Instead, she summoned the Elven Queen's scepter. "Andis didn't offend me, but you did. She Lily." Gu Xingyin softly called out the name that made her expression change. "It's you," Andis suddenly realized. She looked at Gu Xingyin with resentment. Andis knew that she was She Lily. She was obviously the elf in a locked town. Chapter 499. Andis knew that Gu Xingyin had seen through her disguise. She couldn't help but scream. "I've been very cautious ever since I came to this world. I've never provoked an enemy I couldn't afford to provoke, and I've never offended you elves. Why do you have to go against me? You've even tried to kill me 3 times. 3 times? Gu Xingyin caught the main point in her words. Andis looked at her, and knew that she hadn't recognized her the first time. She was the one who had exposed herself. But so what? She wasn't going to let her go. 1,000 years ago, have you forgotten? Human sovereign Wuxia fell at the hands of you and Beemans. Speaking of this, Andis' heart was bleeding. At that time, she was at the peak of her power. It wasn't easy to take advantage of the fact that the human sovereign was seriously injured while he was researching magic. She took the opportunity to seize the right to use that body. That was the strongest cultivator on the Fantasia continent. Andis was confident that as long as she had enough time, she could combine the Runhuang realm with her original strength. At that time, it would be a piece of cake for her to rule the entire Fantasia continent. But the Elven Queen found out. In that battle, the human sovereign's body fell. She was lucky enough to escape with a wisp of her soul, but her power was greatly reduced and her soul was almost destroyed. In order to keep her soul from being destroyed, she had to seal her own soul and wait for the fated one to come. This wait lasted for 1,000 years. Then, she waited for a long time and waited for Lily. Even if the other party's talent wasn't good, she was confident that she could return to the peak with her own strength. However, he just had to meet a meddlesome elf. In that battle, she once again relied on faking her death to escape the calamity. But her vitality was still greatly damaged, and the accumulation of 1,000 years of recuperation was all gone. Later, she learned to be careful. After wandering for a long time, she finally found a suitable host in the capital. Princess Andis was not only talented, but also arrogant and unsociable. She was the perfect candidate. After she obtained the right to use this body, she changed her previous high profile and lived in seclusion. As expected, she didn't arouse the slightest suspicion. She originally thought that this time, she would finally be able to cultivate steadily until she returned to the peak. When the time came, he would definitely teach those elves, who had ruined his plans twice, a lesson. Unfortunately, before she could recover her strength, the elf came looking for her again. The same elf had ruined her plans 3 times. Why is he haunting me like a ghost? While she was cursing angrily, Gu Xingyin was suddenly enlightened. Back then, she had discovered that the person wasn't the real human sovereign Wu Xan, but she hadn't discovered her true identity. He didn't expect her to be the same person as she Lily. Since that was the case, all the more he couldn't let her live this time. Even a cultivator at the level of Ran Huang could be taken advantage of by her. Such an ability was really chilling. Her expression was cold as she said to Andis, "Since you've already told me, I presume you don't plan on leaving this place alive?" Andis laughed and said, "Elf Queen, I admit that you are very strong, and I am far from being your opponent. But aren't you overconfident? Have you forgotten how I managed to escape from you the last few times?" The reason why she dared to be so honest was because she was confident that she could escape from the hands of the person in front of her. Chapter 500. She seemed to know that she was no match for Gu Xingyin. When Gu Xingyin cast a nature magic, she did not avoid it, but went straight for it. Andis fell limply to the ground. Gu Xingyin watched as a wisp of black mist emerged from Andis's body, forming a distorted face in the air. The face smiled viciously at her. "Elven Queen, so what if you found me? I'll see how you're going to erase me." After saying this, the illusory face seemed to be in great pain. It wriggled a few times and disappeared without a trace. The situation was exactly the same as last time. If they hadn't known about it beforehand, everyone would have thought that this thing had already disappeared from the world. This time, Gu Xingyin deliberately used detection magic to scan the surroundings. As expected, she could not find any trace of it. She had to admit that this thing's concealment ability was superb. However, it was too early for her to rejoice. Gu Xingyin took out the small brocade pouch that the system gave her from the space ring on her hand. The small brocade pouch laid flat on her hand. At this moment, it suddenly floated up on its own and spun in the air. Gu Xingyin saw that there seemed to be a faint light flashing from within. Then from a corner, there seemed to be a scream. Gu Xingyin stared blankly at the empty space in front of her. A wisp of black mist suddenly appeared. The thing seemed to be very frightened and screamed uneasily. "What did you take out? How can there be something in this world that can detect my existence?" Ah! The brocade pouch seemed to have a great suppressive effect on her. Gu Xingyin heard her voice and knew that she must be in great pain. However, she did not have the slightest bit of pity. A pitiful person must have a hateful side. If this thing did not use such a despicable method to increase her strength, she would not have to spend so much effort to deal with her. In the end, the black mist could not resist, and was sucked into the brocade pouch. Gu Xingyin could even hear her wails of pain and curses of disbelief. She threw the thing in her hand to the system. "It's done. But can you shut her up?" The system kept the thing inside. She did not know what it did, but the whole world suddenly quieted down. Once the thing was in the system's hands, it could not go wrong. This time, Gu Xingyin was really relieved. Finally, the hidden danger of this world was removed. Gu Xingyin cast nature magic on the unconscious Princess Andis. When she wakes up, Her body will return to normal and forget everything that happened during this period of time. Andis was an innocent person. Gu Xingyin did not know that after she returned to the elves for the elves, as soon as she returned, she was informed that Elder had been waiting for her for 2 days and 2 Ellis elves. Gu Xingyin was worried. Something big must have happened. Otherwise, Ellis would not be like this. But as soon as she entered the palace, she was greeted with a warm embrace. Ellis' hands were very tight, as if he was afraid that the person in his arms would disappear if he loosened his grip. Gu Xingyin was even more worried. What happened that made Ellis, who had been trying so hard to suppress his feelings, suddenly burst out with such intense emotions? Chapter 501. After a long time, Alan let go of the queen in his arms. This time, Gu Xingyin saw it clearly. The emotions in his eyes were not hidden at all. It was so strong that it could drown a person. Your Majesty, fortunately you are okay. Alan's voice startled Gu Xingyin. How could it be so hoarse? She didn't know that since the night she left, Alan had been repeating a dream. He dreamed that he was deceived by a strange human woman. After that, the elven mother tree in the Holy Land was stolen by her, and the entire elven race fell into a tragedy. He watched Her Majesty the Queen, for the entire elven race, give up her life without hesitation, and become the new elven mother tree. This was the first time Alinar woke up from this dream, and he felt that this dream was so absurd. Not to mention that his heart was with the queen. How could he be bewitched by a human woman who casually came to him? Not to mention that there had never been any outsiders in the elven race. But everything in the dream was too real, and it made him worried about the queen who left the Starlight Forest. After that, the second day, the third day, and the fourth day, when Alan was awakened by the same dream every night, he finally panicked. The elves were simple and didn't think much in their hearts. They rarely dreamed. What's more, for magicians like them, when they cultivated to a certain level, sometimes some prophecies would appear in their eyes in the form of dreams. Could it be that the scene in the dream was something that would happen in the future? Alan was shocked by his own guess, and broke out in a cold sweat. No, it's impossible. How could I make such a mistake? How could Her Majesty the Queen have such an ending? He couldn't sit still day and night. Since there was nothing major in the elven race, he simply went to the Elven Queen's palace and waited for her return. That was why the scene that had just happened. Alan Eyre didn't hide anything and told him everything that happened in his dream. During this time, he kept looking at the queen in front of him without blinking. How could such a queen die? He absolutely couldn't allow that to happen. Gu Xingyin was very surprised after listening to his narration. The dream that Arundel had was obviously the ending of the Elven Queen in the original plot. The physical fitness of the elves was very strong, but at present, Alan's eyes were bloodshot. Obviously, he had not rested well for a long time. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but feel a little distressed. She raised her hand slightly and cast a spell. Alan only felt a cool and gentle energy spread all over his body, and the tiredness of the past few days instantly dissipated. Gu Xingyin comforted him softly. Alan, it's just an illusory dream. Trust me, it won't come true. Alan's expression warmed up when he heard that. Gu Xingyin was relieved. Only then did he realize that their posture seemed to be a little ambiguous. At this moment, although Alan Eyre had let go of her, his hands were still wrapped around her waist. There was only a thin layer of clothing between them. Gu Xingyin could even feel the heat from his body. Alan Eyre also seemed to react. But he didn't let go. Instead, he used a little force to pull the person in his arms closer. The two people's bodies were really close together. Meeting the queen's slightly surprised eyes, Alan Eyre smiled slightly. By the way, Your Majesty the Queen, I still have an important thing to tell you. Chapter 502. Alan said to the queen in front of him, I like Your Majesty the Queen. When he said this, his eyes were looking at Gu Xingyin without blinking. Alan only felt that there was no way to stop the thoughts in his heart. Ever since that dream, there was no way to hide the thoughts that wanted to come out. He felt that if something unexpected happened in the future, the confession that he had not said would inevitably become his deepest regret. At worst, he would just be rejected, he thought. At worst, he would just be rejected by the queen. He could still stand far away, watch over her and protect her. Gu Xingyin looked deeply at Alan, who had grown into an adult man in front of her. His shoulders were very wide, enough to shelter anyone from the wind and rain. She thought that with Alan's temperament, one day he would confess to her, but she did not think that this day would come so soon. Perhaps, that dream had really scared him out of his wits. Gu Xingyin suddenly felt a surge of pity in her heart. She curved her lips, gently raised her hand, and hugged the waist of Alan, who was nervously waiting for the verdict. I also like Alan very much. The Queen's lips overflowed with a sigh. Alan's eyes widened in disbelief. He thought of many possibilities. The Queen might coldly reject him and chase him out of the palace for daring to offend her. Or the gentle Queen might tactfully reject him. Or she might just take his words as a joke. He did not dare to think about the possibility that he longed for the most deep in his heart. However, Her Majesty the Queen had said the words "I like you." Alan was ecstatic, but he was also a little nervous. He was afraid that the Queen said was not what he thought it meant. Maybe the Queen did not understand what he meant at all. Alan, who had countless thoughts in his mind, was completely stunned after hearing Gu Xingyin's words. It was as if his whole body was frozen in place. Gu Xingyin looked at the surprised and shocked lover in front of her, and sighed in her heart. She tiptoed slightly and kissed the corner of his lips. Their lips separated as soon as they touched. However, it woke up Alan, who was still in a daze. By the time he regained his senses, Her Majesty had already left his embrace. Alan touched his lips with his hand. Just now, Her Majesty the Queen actually kissed him? Alan couldn't tell what he was feeling. So Her Majesty also liked him? It turned out that Her Majesty actually liked him. He looked ecstatically at Gu Xingyin, who was standing not far away. The other party seemed to know what he was thinking, and nodded with a smile. Alan couldn't suppress a smile on his face. His face was a little red, and he suddenly whispered, "Your Majesty, can I kiss you?" Gu Xingyin secretly thought that even lovers could have such a shy and innocent moment. She did not answer, but looked at him with a smile. Alan never understood what she meant. He walked to her side, and looked at his queen with a sincere and loving gaze. Then he gently kissed her. Gu Xingyin could feel the treasure and love in this kiss, as well as a trace of cautiousness. The innocent Alan did not even know how to kiss. She reached out and wrapped her arms around his waist, stuck out the tip of her tongue, and licked his lips suggestively. Alan's heart moved, and he pried open Gu Xingyin's lips without a teacher, and was ready to attack. "Uncle Alan." A little girl pushed open the door of the hall with a bang, and looked curiously at the two people who were hugging each other. Chapter 503. Alan regretted for the 1000th time that he had chosen to be Ali's guardian. This little guy always came at such a time to make his presence known. As soon as the palace door was opened, Gu Xingyin had already moved aside. It was better not to let the little elf see this. However, no matter how fast he moved, Ali still saw Uncle Alan hugging Her Majesty the Queen. She ran over and hugged Gu Xingyin. She raised her head and blinked her big eyes, which were so adorable that they could melt a fairy's heart. "Your Majesty the Queen, Ali also wants a kiss." Gu Xingyin smiled. She was about to bend down and pick up Ali when the person on her lap disappeared. It turned out that Alan had already carried her away. Alan's face was extremely dark at this moment. No one would be happy to have their good fortune interrupted. He looked at Ali seriously. "Ali, don't you remember the etiquette I taught you? You have to knock on the door before entering, and get permission from the owner." Ali blinked her eyes and said, "Uncle Alan, why do you want to kiss Her Majesty the Queen?" Alan had a headache. This little devil knew how to change the topic at such a young age. Sometimes he really doubted whether Ali was really an elf. He had never met such a worrisome elf. Before he could say anything, Ali shouted first, "Uncle Alan, I want to kiss Her Majesty the Queen." Alan's face was cold. "No way." Ali pouted. "I don't want to kiss Uncle Alan. Her Majesty the Queen can do the same." After that, she looked at the elf queen that she had been drooling for a long time. Under the gaze of two pairs of eyes, Gu Xingyin smiled gently at Ali. Her Majesty the Queen's smile was very lethal. Ali's whole elf body was dizzy. Then she heard the Queen's cold and ruthless words. "No way, little Ali. Your Uncle Alan doesn't want me to be kissed by you. Little Allie looked at the smiling queen, and then looked at Uncle Alan, who was holding her with a proud face. This time, she really puckered her lips and cried out with a wah sound. Her Majesty the Queen and Uncle Alan are too despicable. Her Majesty the Queen is going to marry Elder Alan. This news was like a sudden gust of wind, instantly spreading throughout the entire forest. Many elves who admired the two of them were dumbfounded. They hadn't even started to fall in love, yet they had already fallen out of love. However, most of the elves were lost in their own reverie. In the future, Her Majesty the Queen and Elder Alan would appear together. The scene of two of the most beautiful elves of the elven race appearing together was so dreamy just thinking about it. Surprisingly, not a single elf objected to this matter. All the elves expressed their blessings to the two. This was what Gu Xingyin liked the most about the elves. They were pure and clean-minded. No matter what happened, they would always think of the best. This was also the reason why she announced the news of her marriage as soon as possible. Alan Eyre felt that everything that had happened recently was like an unbelievably beautiful dream. If it wasn't a dream, why did the things that he desired the most in his heart all come true? No, it was even better than what he wanted the most. He used to think that it would be best if the queen could respond to his love. However, the reality was that not only did she respond to his feelings, she even held a wedding. Chapter 504. The wedding was held in the Elf Palace in the Starlight Forest. The day of the wedding was the busiest day in the Starlight Forest in the past 1,000 years. Not only the elves, but many other races were also allowed to enter the Starlight Forest to give their blessings to the queen. Even demons of the dragon clan came in person. He looked at the woman he had admired for thousands of years with melancholy. Seeing her with another elf, his face was full of undisguised happiness. Beeman sighed in the end. No matter how he chased, this woman would not belong to him in the end. Among all the guests, the most eye-catching ones were the natives of the Starlight Forest. There were groups of unicorns carrying the freshest and sweetest fruits in the forest on their backs to congratulate the queen. There were birds holding the most beautiful flowers in their beaks and pinned them on the queen's clothes. All the flowers in the Starlight Forest bloomed on the same day, turning this place into the most dreamy place in the whole fantasy continent. The Elven Queen and Alan, who were dressed in splendid attire, walked out. The appearance of the two of them made everything around them seem dull and dull. The two exchanged vows in front of the Elven Queen's statue and became partners for life. This celebration lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. The elves discovered that after the wedding, their queen and Elder Alan had gone missing. The other elders who knew the truth recalled the queen's words at that time. Now that there is nothing to do in the clan, Alan and I plan to go around the fantasy continent. I will leave the clan's matters to you. When saying this, Her Majesty's hand was still tightly clasped with Alan's. The elders who were forced to swallow a bowl of dog food could only silently accept the work arranged by Her Majesty and wish the queen a happy honeymoon with a smile. The word honeymoon was said by Her Majesty. Oh right, they were also forced to accept the little devil Little Ollie. According to Alan's words, it was not easy for him and the queen to have so much private time. How could they bring Ollie, such a big light bulb, with them? Not to mention, with the little guy's ability to cause trouble, the two of them would not be on a honeymoon, but following behind the naughty child to deal with all kinds of situations. As for Allie waking up to find that her favorite and most beautiful queen and Uncle Allenby had disappeared, that was no longer a matter of the two of them. Gu Xingyin and Alan spent several years touring most of the fantasy continent, until they arrived at Lock Town. Many years ago, they lived here for 6 years. Up until now, the human world had already changed several groups of people. Gu Xingyin saw Shi Lily. Although the lifespan of humans was short, the lifespan of humans who could practice magic would be extended according to the strength of their magic power. Although Shi Lily didn't have a heaven-defying talent like in the original plot, it wasn't a problem for her to live for more than 1,000 years. Shi Lily had long blonde hair. It was obvious that she was very respected in this small town. She seemed to have started to age. Although she still looked young, Gu Xingyin could already feel that the vitality in her body was fading away. What are you looking at? Alan was a little confused. He didn't remember Cecily at all. Gu Xingyin withdrew her gaze and shook her head. Nothing. No matter what Lily was now, it had nothing to do with her, with Alan, and with the elves. Chapter 505. Xian, let's go shopping today? After school, someone shouted from behind her. Gu Xingyin turned back and smiled embarrassedly. Not today, and Yuan Gij has a basketball game in the afternoon. When the people in the classroom left, Gu Xingyin slowly began to pack her things and sort out the plot of this world. This was a story of a childhood sweetheart who couldn't beat the goddess of reality. The owner of this body, Chang Xian, and her boyfriend, Huang and Yuan, grew up together. Their family conditions were similar, and they lived in the same neighborhood. They were completely the true portrayal of childhood sweethearts. Xian was a very simple girl. In her world for more than 10 years, she always thought about getting into a good university and finding a job that could earn money to be filial to her parents. When the two were 15 years old, Huang and Yuan confessed to Chang Xian, and the two naturally got together. The two people's relationship was very good, and they also went to the same high school. Chang Xian loved Huang and Yuan very much. She felt that according to their relationship, after a few years, they would go to university together and get married and have children. She never doubted that the two would be able to live a sweet life together. She never thought that a man's heart could change. Perhaps she knew that a man's heart could change, but she never counted Huang and Yuan as one of those men. Chang Xian felt that the two people's relationship of more than 10 years was not something that could destroy it. However, reality told her that nothing was impossible. In the beginning, she only heard some rumors. They said that the school's basketball captain, Huang and Yuan, and the school's beauty, Qing Luochen, were somewhat close. Qing Luochen, as her name suggested, was very beautiful. Even if she was still in high school, even if she hadn't fully grown up, the face that she revealed now was enough to be called gorgeous. At that time, Huang and Yuan and Chang Xian were the model couple in school. Even the teachers in the school knew about the two. But seeing that the two of them had a good relationship and Chang Xian was always the first in the grade and didn't neglect her studies, they didn't say anything. Someone felt that it wasn't worth it for Chang Xian, and specially ran over to tell her this news. But Chang Xian didn't believe it. Huang Anyuan was handsome and good at basketball. There were many girls in the school who liked him. It wasn't that there weren't any rumors in the past, but it turned out that those were just groundless rumors. She stubbornly believed in her own judgment, until she saw Huang and Yuan and Qing Luochen walking hand in hand intimately. Chang Xian was very shocked at that time, but she still remembered to take Huang Anyuan's face into consideration. She didn't go over and question him on the spot. Instead, she asked him to give her an explanation when they went home together at night. Xian, Chunchen and I are just good friends. Don't believe the rumors outside. Huang Anyuan seemed to be particularly afraid that Chang Xian would misunderstand. He explained and swore that he only had Chang Xian in his heart. Chang Xian chose to believe him, but not long after, she once again saw Huang and accompanying Qing Luochen to go shopping. This time, Chang Xian couldn't use the excuse of being good friends, as she watched the two of them kiss. On the busy street, he didn't care about the gazes of others. Chang Xian only felt that her heart was cold at that time. She had no way to comfort herself that Huang and Yuan did this kind of thing with another girl when he loved her. She didn't hesitate to break up with Huang and Yuan. Even if she said it out loud, her heart would be cut by a knife. But this kind of man she despised. Chapter 506. To be honest, Gu Xingyin appreciated Chang Xian's character very much. If things ended like this, it wouldn't be much. It would just be a scum changing his love. The turning point was yet to come. After Chang Xian saw that Huang Anyuan was cheating on her, she proposed to break up with him. Logically speaking, Huang Anyuan should be eager to agree to it, and then fly away with his new love. But in fact, Huang Anyuan wasn't willing. He begged Chang Xian to give him another chance, saying that he was just obsessed and was seduced by Qing Luochen. He still loved Chang Xian. At the end of the day, he had never expected that Chang Xian, who loved him so much, would be so resolute in breaking up with him. Of course Chang Xian wouldn't agree, But at this time Qing Luochen came to find her in private, saying that she and Huang and Yuan were truly in love, hoping that Chang Xian could take a step back and help them. I'll help your whole family. Because of Qing Luochen's move, Chang Xian couldn't take it anymore, and actually agreed to Huang and Yuan's request. Of course she didn't believe that Huang and Yuan really repented. She just wanted to take revenge on Huang and Yuan and Qing Luochen. Aren't they a scum and a slut? I won't help you. Let's see how you have the face to get together. She didn't believe that Huang and Yuan would really repent. In her heart, this kind of man, there would be a second time, just wait and see. Sure enough, Huang and Yuan stayed by Chang Xian's side every day for the first month. After seeing that Chang Xian's attitude was still cold, he gradually returned to his original state. Adding in the fact that a beauty like Qing Luochen came crying to him several times. The beauty was like a pear blossom in the rain. She always put him first. It was completely different from Chang Xian's coldness towards him now. Just like that, the two of them got back together. Huang and Yuan only remembered how gentle Qing Luochen was now. He completely forgot how Chang Xian used to pour her heart out for him. Qing Luochen liked Huang and Yuan, otherwise as the school flower. How many people would be lining up to chase her? If she didn't like him to the extreme, she wouldn't have done something like stealing someone else's boyfriend. But Huang and Yuan was truly a scum. He couldn't let go of the affection he had for Chang Xian since they were young, but he also couldn't bear to let down Qing Luochen, this great beauty, who had deep feelings for him. Qing Luochen also found out later that Huang and Yuan couldn't bear to part with Chang Xian. As long as she was still around, she would always bear the title of third party. In a moment of impulse, Qing Luochen did one thing. She bribed the gangsters around the school to teach Chang Xian a lesson when she came home alone at night. Her original intention was to teach Chang Xian a lesson so that she would know her place and leave Huang and Yuan on her own accord. But in the middle of the night, when a group of hooligans saw Chang Xian, a girl, they actually went crazy and violated her. Chang Xian was dead. The things that Qing Luochen did were also investigated. But in the end, the police severely punished those hoodlums, and Qing Luochen was only charged with a small crime, because what those hoodlums did was not ordered by her. Adding in the fact that Qing Luochen's family used some connections, she was actually unharmed in the end. Chang Xian's family was of course unwilling. A good daughter was gone just like that, and the main culprit was still free. They continued to call the police and appeal, but in the end, other than wiping out the family's savings, there was no effect at all. Chapter 507. When Gu Xingyin came to this world, Chang Xian and Huang'an were in their first year of high school. At this time, Huang'an hadn't met Qing Luochen yet, so Chang Xian and Huang'an were still a couple that everyone admired. Gu Xingyin packed her things and came to the basketball court. Today was the day that Huang'an's basketball team was competing with the neighboring school's team. Chang Xian's Lin City Third High School and the neighboring Lin City First High School had always been competitors. The two schools were both key high schools, so the enrollment rate, the guaranteed admission rate, and even the various big and small winning rates, they would fight to the death every year. Chang Xian's arrival made many people reveal a tacit smile. Huang'an's roommate directly called her sister-in-law, and one of them shouted at Huang'an, who was warming up, "And Yuan, sister-in-law is here to cheer for you." Huang'an heard this and looked over. Seeing Gu Xingyin, he revealed a smile, threw the towel in his hand and walked over. "Xian Xian." Gu Xingyin responded, "This Huang'an wasn't her lover. Let's go. I saved a good seat for you." Huang'an pulled Gu Xingyin's hand and walked over to the court. Gu Xingyin subconsciously shook off his hand. "Xian Xian." Huang'an looked at her with some surprise. Gu Xingyin's reaction was a conditioned reflex, but she reacted this time. She pretended to pout unhappily. "I saw that you were chatting happily with those girls just now." Huang'an looked over. It was the school's cheerleaders, a group of young and beautiful girls. So she was jealous. Huang'an laughed secretly. He said, "Xian Xian, my feelings for you, do you still doubt it? Those are the cheerleaders in the team. I see them as friends. Really, there's nothing between me and them." Gu Xingyin rolled her eyes at him in annoyance and walked over to the court. Huang'an touched his nose. She looked so angry. But didn't she still choose to cheer for him? Xianxian's mouth was hard, but her heart was soft. Gu Xingyin rested his chin on his hand and looked at the court in boredom. He was surrounded by girls who had come to see handsome guys. At this moment, they were excitedly shouting words like so-and-so is so handsome. She actually couldn't understand these girls, just like how she didn't feel that there was anything beautiful about fighting for the ball on the court. He did not know what had happened at Linqing First High School today, but the members of the team seemed to be on steroids. Even Gu Xingyin, a layman who did not know much about basketball, could see that his school, Linqing Third High School, was going to lose. Oh, they're going to lose. The girl sitting next to her complained in frustration. She turned around and saw Gu Xingyin sitting at the side with an indifferent expression. Xian, how are you still Xian? That girl looked at her a little angrily, as if Gu Xingyin had done something wrong. According to Gu Xingyin's temper, she didn't want to talk to this kind of person. After all, in Changxian's memory, there was no such person at all. But Changxian's character was a very innocent and cute girl. She could only blink her big eyes and look at the girl with a confused face. They're playing so fiercely. I'm afraid Brother On Yuan will get hurt. In other words, the reason why she didn't shout with them was because she was too worried about them. Chapter 508. Changxian's appearance was delicate and petite. A 15-year-old girl looked like she was only 13 or 14 years old. Being looked at with such an innocent gaze, the girl felt that her tone had been too harsh. She coughed awkwardly and said, I'm sorry. I just saw that our school isn't in a good state today, so my tone was a little harsh. Her swift apology made Gu Xingyin have a better impression of her. She smiled sweetly and said, It's okay. You also want our school to win. I understand. Her smile made the girl in front of her sway for a moment. The girl felt that Changxian was really too cute and soft. Really, she probably didn't know how to resist even if she was bullied. She looked at Huang On Yuan with jealousy. Huang On Yuan was really lucky to have such an obedient and cute girl as his girlfriend. She said straightforwardly, My name is Gu Shirley. I'm a senior in the second year of high school. Junior Changxian, you suit my taste. In the future, I'll protect you in Lin City's third high school. If anyone dares to bully you, just tell them my name. Gu Xingyin. What kind of strange development is this? She looked at the girl in front of her. She was very tall, had very fair skin, and had good facial features. However, her hair was cut very short and dyed red. She even had earrings in her ears. Gu Xingyin could tell at a glance that the earrings were real diamonds. She thought that this girl named Gu Shirley must be from a good family. However, her outfit, although Gu Xingyin personally thought that she was quite handsome, in Lin City's third high school, which had always been known for its strict management, it was enough to be considered unconventional. Gu Shirley looked at the little girl in front of her, sizing her up. She knew that a good student like Gu Xingyin would not like a bad student like her. She raised her eyebrows to see her reaction. To her surprise, the girl in front of her didn't have any strange disdain in her clear eyes. On the contrary, there was a hint of appreciation in her eyes. Aren't you afraid of me? She asked curiously. Gu Xingyin blinked in confusion. Why should I be afraid of you? Gu Shirley pointed at himself. I'm dressed like a disobedient and bad student. Don't you hate this kind of person the most? Gu Xingyin smiled. You can't tell a bad student just by looking at her appearance. You have to see what she has done. Besides, I think you look very handsome in this outfit. However, it would be perfect if you could take off your watch and replace it with a punk bracelet, Gu Xingyin suggested according to the knowledge in her mind. Gu Shirley's eyes lit up. He didn't expect that Changxian, who he had only heard of in school and had never seen in person, would bring him such a big surprise. It wasn't just her personality and taste, even her aesthetic sense. You also know about punk? She pulled Gu Xingyin aside, and the two of them started a heated discussion. Gu Xingyin wasn't interested in basketball to begin with. She felt that Gu Shirley was a nice person, so she simply started chatting with her. Of course, most of the time, it was Gu Shirley who was talking. Gu Xingyin sat quietly on the side and listened. When Huang Anyuan returned to his spectator seats with a dejected expression after losing the game, he realized that his girlfriend, who used to bring him drinks and towels, was gone. Chapter 509. He looked around and saw Gu Xingyin chatting happily with a girl in the corner. Huang Anyuan's heart skipped a beat when he saw the girl chatting with her. He walked in that direction. Xian. Gu Xingyin turned around and saw him. Her big eyes were filled with joy. Big brother Anyuan. Looking at Huang Anyuan's jersey, she suddenly realized what she was here for. She lowered her head uneasily and twisted the corner of her shirt with her fingers. She stuck her tongue out at Huang Anyuan. I'm sorry, big brother Anyuan. I just met Sister Shirley and accidentally talked too much. She was originally petite and dainty, and now that she had shrunk her shoulders and looked so pitiful, Huang Anyuan's anger and depression dissipated. However, before he could say anything, Gu Shirley, who was afraid that Gu Xingyin would be scolded, said, Junior Huang, I was the one who dragged Xian here to chat. Don't blame her. Hearing Gu Shirley's words, Huang Anyuan's expression changed, but only for a moment. He smiled and said, Senior Gu, you must be joking. Xian is my girlfriend. I can't wait to dote on her. How could I bear to blame her? Senior Gu, I have something to talk to Xian about. I'll leave first. Huang Anyuan nodded at Gu Shirley and pulled Gu Xingyin away. As Gu Xingyin was being pulled away, she didn't forget to look back. She waved at Gu Shirley with her empty hand. Goodbye, Sister Shirley. How did you provoke her? Huang Anyuan asked worriedly as the two walked to a place where there was no one else. Who? Gu Xingyin was confused. Huang Anyuan didn't have any temper with his ignorant girlfriend. That Gu Shirley. Seeing Gu Xingyin's, so you're talking about her expression, Huang Anyuan continued. That Gu Shirley isn't an easy person to get along with. I heard that she has connections with people in society. Don't get too close to her. You two are from two different worlds. Gu Xingyin thought that if Chang Xian had to choose a person that she should stay away from, Huang Anyuan would definitely be at the top of the list. Of course, she couldn't say that out loud. On the surface, she could only widen her eyes and look unconvinced. Big Sister Shirley is clearly a very good person. Huang Anyuan felt a headache coming on. Xian had always been very obedient to him. Whatever he told her not to do, she would listen obediently. Why did he become so stubborn now? Could it be the late rebellious phase? Huang Anyuan came up with an idea. While Huang Anyuan was still thinking about when his obedient and cute Xian would recover, Lin City No. 1 Middle School was very lively. I told you, using this method to motivate you, it will definitely work. A tall and handsome boy said loudly. Beside him, a group of people jeered. I say, Genius Lu, we completely crushed those guys from No. 3 Middle School. When will you be able to draw out the key areas of the exam for us? The basketball players from No. 1 Middle School, who had been dominating the court just now, were all smiling obsequiously at a boy in a white shirt. The boy didn't look very old. He was about 15 or 16 years old. His skin was very white, and his facial features were clear. He had a calmness and maturity that didn't belong to his age. Hearing this, he revealed a faint smile. When we get back to school, I'll draw it out for you. Yeah. Chapter 510. Lu Yu was Lin City No. 1 High School's top student. This time, it was Lu Yu's roommate Zhang Yun, who was instigated by the school's basketball team. He said that he had to find a way to get Genius Lu to sort out the key points of this midterm exam for them. Otherwise, based on their style of not burning incense and cramming at the last minute, they would definitely be finished. Zhang Yun was full of energy to complete the task and dragged Lu Yu to make a bet. Soon, there would be a basketball game between Lin City No. 1 High School and No. 3 High School. After all, they were the teams that won glory for the school. Lu Yu went to watch the game. If No. 1 High School won, Lu Yu would agree to draw out the key points of the exam for the basketball team. Zhang Yun said to the basketball team, Brothers, I can only help you up to this point. Whether or not you can have fun on the weekends will depend on your efforts in this game. That was why the group of players from No. 1 High School risked their lives on the court. Let's go. I'll treat tonight. Lu Yu, come with us. Number 1 High School's basketball captain said happily. The group pulled Lu Yu away without waiting for him to refuse. It was such a coincidence that Huang Anyuan brought Gu Xingyin out for dinner that night. The two schools were close to each other, and there were only a few cheap and good places around them that were suitable for students to consume. Coincidentally, they met. Oh, isn't this the loser from number 3 high school? A basketball player from number 1 high school saw Huang Anyuan and said in a sarcastic tone. In the blink of an eye, he saw Gu Xingyin beside Huang Anyuan and recognized him at a glance. Who was Chang Xian? She was the top student in the first year of Lin City number 3 high school. She represented number 3 high school and won the first prize in the National Intelligent Mathematics competition. She was also the only person who had defeated Lu Yu and made him only win the second prize. Isn't this Chang Xian from number 3 high school? I heard that you're this guy's girlfriend? TSK, TSK, TSK. If you ask me, isn't this just a flower stuck in a hole? Huang Anyuan was tall and handsome. In terms of appearance, Chang Xian and him were definitely a good match. Since the guy from number 1 high school said that, it was obvious that something was going to happen. Lu Yu frowned when he heard this. Sure enough, Huang Anyuan flew into a rage when he heard this. He stepped forward and glared at the other party. It looked like a conflict was about to break out. Gu Xingyin didn't want to cause any trouble, just because they came out for a meal. Moreover, the other party obviously had the advantage in numbers. She tugged at Huang Anyuan's sleeve and waited until he turned around in confusion. Gu Xingyin looked at the first high school student who spoke. I'm Chang Xian from 3rd high school. You seem to know me? But I'm really sorry, I've never heard of you. Who are you? My family and friends will care about what I do, so you don't have to worry about it. When she said this, her tone was very sincere, and her expression did not reveal the slightest bit of arrogance. But no matter who it was, they could hear the thick ridicule in her words. Translated, this sentence meant, who do you think you are? How dare you meddle in my business? Sure enough, the boy was choked, but he couldn't vent his anger on a girl. He could only resentfully say to Huang Anyuan, you actually let a girl stand up for you when something happens. Are you even a man? Enough. Lu Yu, who had been standing on the side without saying anything, glanced at Gu Xingyin, who was calm and did not show any anger. He turned to the boy and said, didn't you say you wanted to treat me to a meal? When the boy heard Lu Yu's words, he didn't say anything else and brought his people in. When Lu Yu left, he took a deep look at Gu Xingyin. Chapter 511. Lu Yu knew Chang Xian. Ever since he was a child, Chang Xian was the only one who had defeated Lu Yu once out of all the first prize winners. Lu Yu knew that the girl usually looked obedient and cute, but once she was in the examination room or in a competition, her lively eyes would become incomparably sharp, and her cute and harmless face would become very confident. However, today was the first time he saw her sharp-tongued. The little girl pulled her boyfriend behind her and mocked the people on her side without fear. She was like a little bird protecting its food. She was very cute. Somehow, he felt that she looked different from the one he had seen before. Lu Yu seemed to have thought of something, and he suddenly curled his lips into a smile. I say, genius Lu, which beauty are you thinking of? Your smile is so. Zhang Yun really couldn't think of any adjectives, but this didn't stop him from finding it novel. Everyone in number 1 middle school knew that the genius Lu Yu was cold and arrogant. Other than his roommates, he didn't have many good friends. Therefore, the basketball team asked Zhang Yin, who was in the same dorm as Lu Yu, for help. It wasn't that Zhang Yin had never seen Lu Yu smile before. However, most of the time, Lu Yu's lips would curl slightly when he smiled. His smile was very reserved. In his own words, Lu Yu revealed a strong sense of pretentiousness even when he smiled. Therefore, when he saw Lu Yu smiling so interestedly, it was as if he had thought of something that interested him very much. He was very surprised. Unfortunately, when Lu Yu heard his words, he immediately stopped smiling and looked at him indifferently. You're thinking too much. He retracted his thoughts and recalled the scene that had just happened. Although it was the people from number 1 middle school who provoked him first, Lu Yu felt that he was right about one thing. Huang Anyuan was indeed not a man to hide at the back and let a girl come forward when he encountered a problem. If it were him, he definitely wouldn't let his girlfriend be criticized at all. Lu Yu realized that his thoughts had wandered off again. He collected his thoughts and shook his head. On the other side, Huang Anyuan brought Gu Xingyin to eat at another place. You know Lu Yu? Huang Anyuan suddenly asked. Gu Xingyin shook her head honestly. Chang Xian and Lu Yu had never crossed paths before. However, there would be more in the future. Gu Xingyin snickered in her heart when she recalled the last glance he gave her. That's strange. I just felt that he was helping us out. I've only heard of his reputation. Huang Anyuan was a little puzzled. Gu Xingyin said casually. Maybe the other party doesn't want to cause any trouble. After all, if they really do, they will be in the wrong. Huang Anyuan nodded. That's true. The two of them went home after dinner. Huang Anyuan sent Gu Xingyin downstairs. What made Gu Xingyin speechless was that when he left, he actually leaned over and wanted to kiss her. Gu Xingyin knew that this little intimacy between couples was nothing, but she was not Chang Xian. Other than her lover, she could not tolerate any other man touching her. She pretended to be very shy and blushed as she pushed Huang Anyuan away. She ran back to her room under his gloomy and amused gaze. At night, lying in her room, Gu Xingyin began to think of Lu Yu. It seemed that her lover this time was another cold and abstinent Prince Charming. Chapter 512. She got up in the morning, washed up, and tidied up everything. Gu Xingyin looked at herself in the mirror. Her long black hair was tied into a neat ponytail, no makeup, and no makeup. Chang Xian's eyes were very big, and there were two little dimples when she smiled. Her facial features were very delicate, but there was still a bit of baby fat on her face. Moreover, she looked too young. She wasn't that short, but she didn't know why. When others looked at her, they felt that she didn't look like a 15-year-old girl. People would even believe it if she said she was 13. Gu Xingyin also secretly ridiculed Huang Anyuan. Chang Xian looked so young, but he was actually moved. But from a man's point of view, she could understand why Huang Anyuan liked Qing Luochen. After all, Chang Xian was too young. Even if he wanted to kiss her, when he met those ignorant big eyes, it would make people feel like they were leading this ignorant little girl astray. Qing Luochen was different. She was beautiful, had a good figure, and knew how to dress herself. This kind of girl in high school was simply the goddess of all the boys' hearts. How much affection could a high school boy really have? Being liked by this kind of beauty, it was normal for him to fall in love with someone else. But understanding was understanding, not forgiving was not forgiving. Xian, come and eat breakfast. She opened the door, and Mother Chang just came out of the kitchen. She was holding a plate of fried eggs as she smiled at her. Steaming milk and homemade bread were already placed on the table. Chang Xian's family was a very traditional family. Father Chang worked outside to earn money for the family, and Mother Chang was responsible for keeping the house tidy. Other than that, she was responsible for taking care of the big and small family. Gu Xingyin's heart warmed. High school required self-study, so Chang Xian had to wake up before 6 every day, and Mother Chang had to make breakfast for her before she went to school, so she had to wake up earlier than her every day. After all these years, even on weekends, Mother Chang had never slept in. She couldn't help saying, "I already said, Mom, I'll just eat outside in the morning. You don't have to wake up this early to make breakfast for me. It's still okay now, but winter is so cold." Mrs. Chang took a piece of bread and handed it to her. She smiled and said, "My child, I don't have anything to do. I'm already used to waking up at this time, so I don't feel tired. Besides, how could the food outside be nutritious and unhygienic? Hurry up and eat before it's too late again." Gu Xingyin had no choice but to nod. Chang Xian had parents who loved her very much. Unfortunately, in the original plot, after their daughter's death, the two elders refused to accept the truth and appealed through various channels. Not only did Mr. Chang lose his job, but his family's savings were also depleted. The two of them spent the rest of their lives in desolation. Don't worry. In this life with me Gu Xingyin around, Chang Xian will always be fine. You will also have a peaceful and happy old age. Huang Anyuan was waiting for Chang Xian downstairs. The parents of both families were already used to this. These two children had been going to school hand in hand since kindergarten. In the blink of an eye, it had been more than 10 years. I heard that next week, you're going to participate in a competition? Huang Anyuan asked. Gu Xingyin nodded. She was going to represent the school to participate in a physics competition in the capital. In the original plot, it was in this half a month that Huang Anyuan met Qing Luochen. Chapter 513. When they reached the school gate, Gu Xingyin suddenly stopped and said to Huang and Yuan very seriously, "And Yuan Gij, this time I'm going to the capital. If I can make it all the way to the finals, it will take about half a month. You must think of me every day. You're not allowed to like other girls." Huang and Yuan laughed. This wasn't the first time Chang Xian had been separated from him for a few days. She had never said such words before. According to what she meant, she had full confidence in their relationship. Why did she suddenly feel a sense of crisis this time? But he still enjoyed the feeling of being remembered and relied on by his girlfriend. He reached out and rubbed Gu Xingyin's head and said with a smile, "Got it, don't worry, little vinegar jar." Gu Xingyin smiled and didn't say anything. The only thing she could do was to remind him as much as possible. Although according to the usual plot, Huang and Yuan would most likely still meet Qing Luochen and begin to develop an unusual relationship. The days of high school were tense and dull. Soon, it was the day Gu Xingyin went to the capital. Lin City Third High School didn't only send Chang Xian as a representative this time. There were 3 other people, a second-year senior and 2 third-year seniors. Chang Xian was the only first-year senior and was the youngest, but also the most hopeful of the 4. She was small, well-behaved and cute, so she was taken care of by the other 3. But when she got on the bus prepared by the school, Gu Xingyin unexpectedly saw Lu Yu. Sitting with him were a few other first high school students. They should be the students from Lin City First High School this time. It turned out that the 2 schools were from the same city, and after arriving in the capital, they were considered to be a small group. The principals of the 2 schools discussed and decided that it would be better to simply put these students together and cultivate their feelings in advance. But in fact, the students of the 2 schools were very unfamiliar with each other. They sat on both sides of the bus and only communicated with their schoolmates. The teachers of both sides were helpless. They couldn't force the students to make friends, right? Gu Xingyin held her cup and sat by the window drinking water. Little did she know that her actions had attracted the attention of almost everyone in the car. The adorable little girl was holding a hamster cup and drinking slowly. It was like a big hamster hugging a small hamster. How could there be such a cute girl? A student from Linqing First High School burst into laughter. Gu Xingyin looked over in confusion, only to find that most of the people in the bus were looking at her. She blinked in confusion and reached out a hand to touch her face. There was nothing wrong. What were they looking at? Her reaction caused many people to smile again. Even Lu Yu had a faint smile on his face. He didn't notice that Gu Xingyin seemed to have seen something incredible. She stared at him and said, "You can actually laugh." After she finished speaking, she realized what she had just said. Her face suddenly turned red, and she held the cup to cover her face, pretending that she was looking at the scenery. Pfft. This time, even the teacher leading the team laughed. The awkward atmosphere in the bus disappeared in an instant. A student from Linqing First High School even teased, "Looks like our genius Lu is still the best. He even got a spot in Third High School." Chapter 514. For the rest of the journey, the atmosphere in the car was very good. However, Gu Xingyin helplessly realized that everyone seemed to like teasing her. Come on, Chang Xian just looked very silly and cute. She was not really silly. Gu Xingyin, who looked innocent on the outside but was cunning on the inside, sneered in her heart. After making a few people who made fun of her suffer in secret, those people finally restrained themselves a little. However, during the meal, a drumstick was served to her. Xian, come and eat more. Looking at you, I know that you don't eat enough. On the other side, a bowl of soup was served as well, and he added, That's right, Xian, eat more. A few minutes later, Gu Xingyin looked at the small mountain of soup in the small bowl and wanted to cry. She was being raised like a little pig. when she got out of the car. "Come, I'll carry it for you." The luggage bag in her hand was snatched away by a senior. "That's right. How can you let a girl carry your luggage?" The school bag on her back was also taken off. The senior who was carrying her own school bag smiled at this scene and did not feel that she was being treated unfairly at all. That's right, such a young child. It's only right to pamper her a little. The senior thought to herself with relief. Senior sister, have you forgotten how you exploited your younger brother, who just entered the 3rd grade at home? Although Gu Xingyin felt that they were a little too enthusiastic, she did not feel disgusted. This was because she could feel that these people's kindness to her was genuine. But why? Gu Xingyin was puzzled. She did not do anything special. The system gave the answer. It mainly depends on the face and temperament. Gu Xingyin, the system continued. To be more specific, Chang Xian has always been the kind of person who is small and delicate, and can easily arouse the maternal instincts of others. It's just that in the original plot, she put all her attention on Huang On Yuan, and never cared about anyone else. Naturally, other people can feel her feelings, and of course, they will not be cold to her. But after the change of host, although you tried your best to pretend to be Chang Xian, you didn't have any feelings for Huang On Yuan. Of course, the feeling you gave others would be different. In this way, Chang Xian's advantage will be fully displayed. Gu Xingyin thought about it carefully. Indeed, in the original plot, although Chang Xian's popularity wasn't bad, it wasn't very good either. She didn't even have a close friend in school. It was very normal. She had only chatted with him for a few sentences, and she would say, "Brother On Yuan." Who could stand it? So much so that after Chang Xian's incident, although everyone would scold Huang On Yuan for being a scumbag and a hooligan, no one went to Chang Xian's side at that time to comfort her. After Gu Xingyin came to this world, although the people around her didn't realize that Chang Xian's soul had changed, they could sense her change, and were naturally willing to get close to her. The school had already arranged hotel accommodations for the students who came to participate in the competition. Gu Xingyin and a senior from the school stayed in the same room. Gu Xingyin came out of the shower and saw the senior reading a book. "Senior, you're so hardworking," Gu Xingyin exclaimed. The senior looked at her helplessly. "Believe it or not, if you casually knock on their room right now, I guarantee that they're all reading." She was just saying it casually, but she didn't expect this junior to believe it. She put on her pajamas and ran out of the room. The senior, her heart was suddenly filled with endless worry. What would happen to such an innocent junior sister if no one protected her in the future? Chapter 5:15. Gu Xingyin knocked on the doors of a few rooms one by one. Just as the senior had expected, they were all reading books. After knowing the purpose of her visit, the few of them were like the senior. They didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but at the same time, they were worried for this one-track-minded junior. The last room belonged to Lu Yu. Lu Yu opened the door and was a little surprised to see Gu Xingyin outside the door. In a flash, Gu Xingyin entered the door. Sure enough, Lu Yu's roommate was reading a thick physics book in front of the desk. Lu Yu looked at her and looked around the entire room. Then, as if she had discovered a new continent, she said excitedly, "Genius Lu, you're not reading." Lu Yu didn't know what she was thinking. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Why should I read?" Gu Xingyin said proudly, "Senior said that if I knocked on the doors of every room, you would all be reading books. I don't need to believe it. Sure enough, you're not reading." Lu Yu knew what was going on. Only the little girl in front of him would take such words seriously. At this time, Lu Yu's roommate said, "You can't compare Lu Yu to a group of ordinary people like us. I've participated in so many competitions with him. Every time, I would stay up late to study. This guy has never brought a book." What was even more heart-wrenching was the fact that this guy, who never brought a book, would completely defeat them, who had studied hard, and win first place every time. Sigh, this guy felt that his life was full of tears just thinking about it. Gu Xingyin stuck out her tongue and was about to leave when Lu Yu suddenly stopped her. Lu Yu looked her up and down and said, "Girls, it's better not to walk around in pajamas in the future. It's not safe." After saying that, He turned his face and walked to the side. Gu Xingyin lowered her head and looked at her outfit. It was autumn now. She was wearing long-sleeved cotton pajamas. Was there anything wrong with it? No, as an obedient and cute little girl. She still smiled and nodded at Lu Yu before leaving. After Gu Xingyin left, Lu Yu's roommate looked at him with an expression of "I've discovered a big secret." Oh my, our top student Lu Yu has always been a flower on the top of the mountain. Why is he suddenly concerned about others? Lu Yu didn't even bother to look at him. She's so innocent. Isn't it normal for others to care about her? After thinking for a while, he added, she has a boyfriend. Don't think too much about it. It'll affect her reputation. However, she didn't know if he was talking to his roommate or himself. Senior, Gu Xingyin pushed open the door. The senior looked at her happy face and asked directly, let me guess. Is there someone who didn't read the book? Gu Xingyin nodded. The senior thought to herself that she was right and continued, that person must be Brainiac Lu. Gu Xingyin widened her eyes. How did you know? The senior said helplessly, Brainiac Lu never brings books with him when he goes out. Who doesn't know? She was just saying it casually. Who knew that Gu Xingyin would take it seriously? Gu Xingyin sat down with a smile. I didn't bring books either. The senior pretended to be angry and said, I know. Brainiac Lu is a pervert. Now there's another little pervert. The few of them could represent the school to participate in the national competition. They were all top students in the school, and were the top students in the eyes of others. However, there were some people who were born to bring down others. Chapter 5:16. The situation of the competition was similar to what they had expected. After rounds of competition, the first and second place were unsurprisingly decided between Gu Xingyin and Lu Yu. According to the original plot, Chang Xian had lost. Gu Xingyin did not intend to fight for such an undeserved reputation. In the end, her score was slightly lower than Lu Yu's, and she had to settle for second place. Xian, are you okay? Xian, don't be sad. You're still smiling. Lu Yu is 1 year higher than you. Next time, you definitely won't lose. Let's go. Teacher will bring you to a feast. The contestants from other places looked curiously at Lin Cheng's side. The other contestants were congratulating the winner, but on their side, everyone was comforting the girl who had won second place. They were not afraid that the winner would feel uncomfortable. The students who wanted to watch the show all looked at Lu Yu and found that he was indeed frowning and walking towards Gu Xingyin, who was surrounded by the crowd. There was a good show to watch. The onlookers expressed that their gossipy hearts were burning. Seeing Lu Yu walk to Gu Xingyin's side, his expression was still a little cold. Then he said, with your level, you shouldn't have made a mistake in the last experiment. Be more careful. This first place should have been yours, he said with a little displeasure. What? The onlookers were dumbfounded. What happened to the catfight? This script was not right. Gu Xingyin thought to herself that she had made a mistake on purpose. Of course, she could not say that out loud. She could only laugh awkwardly and stick out her tongue. I know. I'll be more careful next time. What a cute girl. The onlookers saw her actions and thought in their hearts. No, wasn't the focus of attention that they were clearly competitors. But why were they so harmonious with each other? They were clearly not from the same school. The other students from the two schools looked at the expressions of the people around them and knew what they were thinking. Suddenly, a mysterious sense of superiority rose in their hearts. I know what others don't know. How can you understand the unity and friendship between our Lin City schools? This time, the results of the two schools in Lin City were pretty good. Since the school would pay for all the expenses, the two leading teachers discussed and decided to delay their return for a day. In the evening, they took the students out for a big meal. After dinner, the students even asked them to open a KTV box. Gu Xingyin sat in the corner, absent-mindedly listening to a boy wailing and howling. The system had just reminded her that after half a month, Huang and Yuan and Qing Luochen really began to have good feelings for each other. Gu Xingyin was mentally prepared for this, so she wasn't surprised. She was just thinking about how to face Huang on Yuan and deal with this matter when she returned to school. Xian, don't just sit there. Come, senior sister has ordered a song for you. Unexpectedly, a microphone was stuffed into her hand. Gu Xingyin didn't understand and took it. A familiar childhood memory rang in her ears. On the other side of the mountain, on the other side of the sea, there was a group of Smurfs. Gu Xingyin. Senior sister, you can do it. She tried to act cute and asked the others for help. But everyone, including the leading teacher, looked at her with a smile. Gu Xingyin. A group of people watching the fun. I'll endure it. She endured the shame and finished singing the song. Senior sister didn't let her go and shook the phone. Junior sister's soft cute children's collector's edition. I saved it. Ha 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 ha. The laughter of the group filled the box. Chapter 517. Gu Xingyin happily returned to school. She knew that there was still a good show waiting for her. On this day, Huang and Yuan waited for her to go to school as usual. There was no difference between the two of them, until Gu Xingyin went to her class. The classes in the third high school were arranged according to the students' grades. The first, second, and third classes were the legendary important classes, and the others were the normal classes. Chang Xian was of course the important class of the important classes, a student from the first class. And Huang and Yuan was in the normal class. Gu Xingyin sat in her seat for the morning self-study. There was never a teacher in class 1's morning self-study, and the school never worried that the students would waste time. Gu Xingyin hadn't sat down for long when the deskmate beside her patted her shoulder. Gu Xingyin turned her head. Her deskmate was a girl with glasses. She looked very quiet, and her name was Li Manman. Xian, I have something to tell you. Li Manman looked a bit conflicted. Gu Xingyin's heart skipped a beat, but her face showed a trace of curiosity. Li Manman hesitated for a bit before asking. Do you know who Qing Luochen is? The second-year student in our school. The very beautiful girl. Gu Xingyin nodded. I've heard of her. Even if Chang Xian hadn't seen Qing Luochen, she definitely wouldn't be unfamiliar with this name. Li Manman's expression became even more conflicted. She lowered her voice and said, I have something to tell you. Don't be angry when you hear it. Right now the school is abuzz with rumors, saying that Qing Luochen and... She paused for a bit before continuing. Are very close to your families Huang and Yuan. Li Manman's words were light. The two of them could clearly be described as intimate. Huang and Yuan and Chang Xian, in the eyes of all the students, were a pair with a good relationship. Qing Luochen coming in now would easily cause others to dislike her. After Li Manman finished, she looked at Gu Xingyin with some worry. She knew how much Xian liked Huang and Yuan, and was afraid that she would be sad. Gu Xingyin's reaction was out of her expectations. Her face was still calm as she smiled and said, They might just be normal classmates. I'll personally ask Big Brother and Yuan after school. Li Manman's hands were already wrinkling the corner of her shirt. It was clear that her heart wasn't as calm as she looked. She sighed in her heart and didn't say anything. She could only hope that it was like what Xian said. After school, Huang and Yuan and Xian didn't Brother on Yuan, can I ask you something? Gu Xingyin's expression was not as happy as usual. Huang and Yuan's heart skipped a beat, but he still smiled and said, What is it? Tell me. Gu Xingyin stopped and turned to look at him. I heard that you and our school's Qing Luochen have been getting closer recently. When she said this, her eyes were fixed on Huang on Yuan. Huang on Yuan was not used to it. His Xian had always looked at him with longing and dependence, calling him Big Brother on Yuan softly. When had she ever looked at him so seriously? He subconsciously denied it. Don't listen to other people's nonsense. Luochen wants to join the school's cheerleading team. If there's anything, please call me. That's why we got closer. Gu Xingyin said lightly. Oh, is that so? Chapter 518. She looked at Huang and Yuan. Big Brother and Yuan is only one of the basketball team members. She didn't ask about anyone else, and only asked about you. There are so many cheerleaders on the basketball team, but Big Brother and Yuan isn't close to any of them. You're only close to Qing Luochen. There are so many students in the school, but no one else has a scandal, only the two of you. She gave a short laugh. Big brother in Yuan, do you think I'm stupid? Huang in Yuan was a bit angry from her words as he said, Xian, you weren't like this before. Why are you like those girls now, being so calculative? Look, his thoughts were seen through, and he was blaming her. Gu Xingyin retorted without any trace of politeness. What does Big Brother in Yuan want me to be like? Forever locking myself in the ivory tower. Not caring about the outside world. Pretending not to know about the rumors about my boyfriend. Lying to myself that you'll always be true to me? Huang in Yuan had never seen such an eloquent Chang Xian. He was at a loss for words. Seeing that he couldn't even give a proper explanation, Gu Xingyin gave a cold snort. She took her bag back from his hands and went home on her own. On the other side of the road, Lu Yu looked at the two with a frown. Chang Xian seemed to have a conflict with her boyfriend? He looked again and Chang Xian had already left with her bag without looking back. Lu Yu put this matter in his heart and walked away. The next morning, Gu Xingyin finished Mother Chang's love breakfast as usual and went out. Huang in Yuan was waiting for her at the entrance of the community early in the morning. Gu Xingyin looked at him and prepared to go around him. Huang in Yuan came over with a smile and said with a smile, Xian, don't be angry. There's really nothing between me and Qing Luochen. We've been together for so many years. Do you still not believe it? Gu Xingyin gave a cold snort, but her tone was much more relaxed. Then explain to me, where did the rumors about you two come from? Huang on Yuan naturally said a lot of good things, and her anger finally subsided a little. Gu Xingyin also knew that this was just some gossip. Huang in Yuan and Qing Luochen didn't really do anything. With Chang Xian's character, it was impossible for her to break up with Huang on Yuan so easily. She had asked the system to keep an eye on the two of them at all times. As long as the two of them secretly met, she would be the first to know. When the time came, she would give them a big gift. Huang on Yuan was a little depressed recently. Xian, who had always liked to stick to him, threw a tantrum after hearing the rumors about him and Luochen. He managed to coax her with great difficulty, but she still treated him indifferently and was no longer as considerate as before. Even his buddies from the basketball team said to him meaningfully, "And Yuan, what about this girl? You have to take a good look at what is truly suitable for you. I've seen my sister-in-law pour her heart and soul out to you all these years. Don't go down the wrong path." Xian was small, so they all jokingly called her sister-in-law. Occasionally, he would even hear his classmates talking about him, saying that he was too timing and was a scumbag. It was simply too distracting. He couldn't help but blame Gu Xingyin. If she was willing to continue being sweet with him like before, and the person involved didn't care, the rumors would naturally fall apart. Xian was becoming less and less considerate. Chapter 519. At this time, Huang in Yuan received a call from Qing Luochen. He hesitated a bit, but still picked it up. Gu Xingyin quickly received the news that the two of them were together again. She sneered in her heart. As the saying goes, a dog can't change its spots. If she believed that Huang in Yuan could keep it, she might as well buy a lottery ticket and win the first prize. Third high school was only this big, and Huang in Yuan and Qing Luochen were both in school, so it was inevitable that they would be exposed. The rumors in the school spread even more, and even Gu Xingyin heard a few things. "Aya Xian, why are you still so calm?" Li Man was worried for her. Gu Xingyin just smiled and shook her head. Li Man thought that she still had expectations for Huang in Yuan, and couldn't help shaking her head in her heart. Xian is too naive. At the same time, her heart was filled with disgust towards Huang in Yuan and Qing Luochen, who came between the two of them. One was a scum who ate from the bowl and looked at the pot. The other was a slut who knew that he had a girlfriend and still stuck to him. It seemed like the two of them were a good match. Under Gu Xingyin's connivance, there were more than one or two people who had the same thoughts as Li Man. Before Huang in Yuan and Qing Luochen realized it, their reputation in Lin City's third high school had already been ruined. After class, Gu Xingyin heard someone say that someone was looking for her, and she went out to see an unexpected person. "Big Sister Shirley?" Gu Shirley looked at her. "Have you heard about your boyfriend Huang in Yuan's troublesome matters?" That daring fellow actually dared to play with the people Gu Shirley is protecting. Xian, say something. Do you want big sister Shirley to help you beat him up? As long as you say something, I can make it so that he can't come to school for half a month. Gu Xingyin. Very good, this girl was a bit savage. But on the surface, she just bit her lips and said awkwardly, I don't believe that big brother in Yuan is this kind of person. He personally told me that there was nothing between him and Qing Luochen. Gu Shirley was so angry that he wanted to laugh. If there was really nothing going on, why would the rumors be so fierce? Everyone knew that the two of them were together. Only an innocent girl like Chang Xian still foolishly believed in her big brother on Yuan. She didn't say much. All right, since you believe him, I won't say anything. If you figure it out one day, remember to look for me. I've disliked that guy for a long time. Gu Xingyin looked at her helplessly. Big sister, when you domineeringly threw out the words of wanting to beat someone up, could you consider that the person standing opposite you was his girlfriend? When Gu Xingyin returned to her seat, Li Manman suddenly leaned over mysteriously and whispered, Xian, is that person the legendary Gu Shirley? When she said this, the excitement in her eyes could not be concealed. Gu Xingyin nodded, puzzled. She asked, You also know big sister Shirley? Li Manman nodded vigorously. Of course, Gu Shirley is my idol. I once saw with my own eyes that he sent a hooligan who came to our school to collect protection money flying with one kick. He's simply too handsome. Gu Xingyin. Children these days, their beauty was really different. In the neighboring Lin City First High School, Lu Yu also knew about Huang and Yuan and Qing Luochen. Top student Lu, did you hear? Our Xian's boyfriend cheated on her? Voila, Lu Yu's pen made a scratch on the page of the book. He coldly said. Chapter 520. It was a rare once-a-month holiday. In the past, Huang on Yuan would bring Chang Xian around Lin City for a stroll at such times. But this time, Huang on Yuan said that the school team had something to do and asked Gu Xingyin to rest at home. Gu Xingyin knew who had something to do. She called a few people one by one. First it was Gu Shirley, then Li Manman, and then Chang Xian's good friends in school. Her reason was that it was a rare holiday, and everyone was going out to play. Among these people, other than Gu Shirley, they were all good girls who were focused on studying. At first, Gu Shirley felt a little depressed when she saw this. After all, in her mind, these top students with good grades had always had their eyes on the top of their heads. They would never bother with a bad student like her. The other girls looked at Gu Shirley and were a little scared. After all, in their minds, Gu Shirley was the kind of bad student who was disobedient, undisciplined, and liked to fight and cause trouble. But there was Li Manman. Before anyone could speak, Gu Shirley saw a quiet girl with glasses walk over. Her eyes flashed with a fanaticism that didn't match her appearance. Senior Shirley, my name is Li Manman. I'm Xuan's deskmate. Li Manman introduced herself. You know me. Gu Shirley was surprised. The kindness in the girl's eyes made her expression soften. Li Manman nodded vigorously. Of course. I think Senior Shirley is very handsome. Gu Shirley could not help but laugh. She glanced at Gu Xingyin. What kind of friends did Xian have? All of them did not play by the rules. She looked at Li Manman and could not help but smile. Thank you for the compliment. You're very beautiful too. Since she knew one of them, Gu Shirley naturally introduced herself to the others. Both sides realized that the other party was not as difficult to get along with as they thought. They were surprisingly harmonious. Xian, where do you plan to take us to play today? Li Manman asked. Gu Xingyin had asked them out in the name of taking them out to play. When she heard the question, she smiled and said, The second prize for the physics competition this time is quite a lot. My parents let me keep it all for myself. What do you think about going to the new underwater world? A girl said, The underwater world. I'm planning to go there when I'm free. Everyone thought that it was a good idea to have a barbecue after watching it. Gu Xingyin was in a good mood as she set off with her little friends. Of course, the reason why she chose the underwater world was not just for fun. The real important point was, Huang and Yuan and Qing Luochen's date was at this place. Gu Xingyin and the others came in the morning. While Huang Enyuan's date was in the afternoon, Gu Xingyin invited everyone to enjoy the scenery and eat. After all, even though she had brought them here out of selfishness, since she was treating, she naturally had to let them have a good time, right? After the meal, Li Manman suddenly said, "Oh, I forgot that there's a mermaid performance on the second floor. Shall we go and take a look?" Everyone's interest was piqued by her words, and they all expressed their desire to go and take a look. Gu Xingyin, who was worried about finding a reason to let everyone in, said, "Man, good job. She really was a godly assist." Li Man excitedly walked in front, wanting to see what the mermaid performance was like. However, she suddenly stopped in her tracks, because in front of her, there were two familiar figures holding hands and talking intimately. The smile on the boy's face looked very happy. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.